Harriet Tubman is famous as a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She is also known as an abolitionist, a spy, a scout. She is also a Civil War soldier and a leader. One thing that Harriet believed in is that God didn't mean for anyone to be a slave. Freedom should be universal. It should be universal. In the early life of Harriet Ross, also known as Minty, by the time Minty was 5, she was in the web of being hired out as a slave. She was a house slave that worked in the house at just 6. She would have to take care of the mistress's child, and when that child cried, she would be whipped for that cause. She had to constantly endure being with her slave owners all the time because she was in the house with them. She had to watch her older sisters be ripped away, screaming in chains at slave auctions. Slavery was the disintegration of the family unit at its core. Family members would be threatened to be sold. As cotton production increased, so did the sale of slaves. During that time, slaves were being bought and sold rapidly because of the influx of people needed to work the new fields. They were bought and moved down to the Deep South. For the slaves at that time, they knew that was a death sentence, as the average lifespan of a slave would be only 7 years after getting to the Deep South. Around 1844, Minty met a free black man named John Tubman. And when they married, Harriet Ross became Harriet Tubman that we know and love today. Harriet Tubman was a slave that had the chance to escape and make it to freedom. While she escaped, her heart went out for her family that was still in slavery and in bondage. She said, "I had crossed the line of which I had so long been dreaming. I was free, but there was no one to welcome me to the land of freedom. I was a stranger in the land, and my home, after all, it was down in the old cabin corner with the old folks and with my brother and sister. But to this solemn resolution I came, I was free, and they should be free also. I would make a home for them in the north." Her goal was to bring many more slaves to freedom, starting with her family. Harriet Tubman finally had the chance to bring her brothers to freedom in 1851. That same year, she tried to bring her husband, but at that moment, her husband has gotten a new wife that was a freed slave. Despite this setback, Harriet did not let this ruin her trip. She made it a point to take him the slaves, also known as fugitives, from the slave states to the free states, thus committing her cause to the Underground Railroad. She committed her life as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, allowing many fugitives to make it up north by various ways. As you can see in this map, you can see how the slaves moved up in the states to try and get up north to create this life in the free states, to be a free slave, no longer under this situation of slavery and bondage. While yes, she was over here bringing these slaves to the northern states, there was many consequences for being caught and also the deterrence from escaping. Some of these included death, whipping, ball and chain, etc. These things brought terror into the slaves to prevent them from leaving. But at the heart and core, the slaves were still the first abolitionists. They wanted to motivate to bring freedom to them. They got the white abolitionists to agree with them to have slaves be free, to want slaves to be free. When we look at Harriet Tubman's life as a whole, we can see that she was always an outlaw because she started off being outside the law since slaves were property instead of people. So when she started to escape, she became even more of an outlaw because that was illegal and frowned upon at that time in the slave states. When Harriet Tubman returned and started taking slaves out from the slave states to free states, she became even more of an outlaw because she was breaking the Fugitive Slave Act that required slaves that was caught to be returned. So her taking them out was already a crime that was punishable by so many different means, and she continued anyways to try and better the lives of these slaves, to better the lives that they have outside instead of being stuck in slavery and in bondage and being oppressed by their slave masters. Harriet Tubman did everything in her power to make sure these slaves made it to the free states, to make sure that she lost no one, that no one was left behind, that once they started a journey, they had to finish it. Because if they didn't, they would be killed or someone may be killed. The people that benefited having her as an outlaw was the slaves, because that gave them something to look forward to, somewhere to go to get out of the realm of slavery. But it also sadly benefited the slave masters because they could be more harsh on the slaves, because now that they have slaves leaving and fleeing from different revolutions and from the Underground Railroad, so they had reasons to be harsh, to be punishing their slaves, because some are thinking to leave and some are not, but still have to deal with the consequences of the slaves that left. Overall, Harriet Tubman's life net benefited the life of slaves and helped them create a life outside of slavery and bondage. For this reason, her being an outlaw was a benefit to the people and community around her.